Good evening, Wakefield. Welcome to our town council meeting of Monday, April 10th. I officially call this meeting to order. Can we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm taking my attendance. I see Councillor Smith-Galvin, Councillor Chines, Councillor Dennehy, Councillor McLean, Councillor Vincent, and myself. So we have enough to start our meeting. Going on to item number 4, executive session. Can we have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second?
And a roll call vote. Councillor Vincent?
Yes.
Councillor McLean?
Yes.
Councillor Dennehy?
Yes.
Councillor Chines?
Yes.
Councillor Smith-Galvin?
Yes.
And myself. That's unanimous to go into executive session.
And Madam Chair, for the purpose of discussing collective bargaining.
Yes, for the purpose of discussing collective bargaining.
And with the intent to return to open session.
Yes, and with the intent to return to open session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, welcome back. We are back into open session. I'm joined by my entire council here. We're all here today. Going to public engagement. I think we have some members of the public who want to speak. Come up to the microphone. Please introduce yourself with your name and your address. We're not super strict, but there's a 3-minute timeline, and we will listen to what you say, and there's not usually a back and forth.
Read my comment. My name is Jennifer Fanning. I'm at 4 Pheasantwood Drive in Wakefield. My comment is about the Northeast MetroTech's plan to build the new school on the hilltop. A couple of weeks ago, I submitted an open meeting law complaint against the school building committee. The complaint covers alleged violations over almost the entire period of time that the committee has been meeting. The complaint says that for the first 22 months of the project, the school building committee posted no public meeting notices about their meetings. It says that for the next 13 months of the project, the building committee posted meeting notices only sporadically, not for every meeting and not to every town in the district. During that time when meeting notices were posted, the notices did not include an agenda or announcements of upcoming votes, something that's required under the open meeting law. 3 votes took place during that period of time, none of which were announced to the public. One of those votes was the vote on the location of the new school building. When the open meeting law complaint was shared with town representatives on the building committee, one representative replied, "It will be interesting to learn whether or not Northeast failed to submit meeting notices in a timely manner, or if in fact the clerks in the cities and towns erred by not posting the notices accordingly." The implication being that if meeting notices weren't posted to the towns, it was the fault of all 12 town clerks in the district, not of the building committee. The idea strains credulity. 2 members of the building committee are from Wakefield. One is Wakefield's representative, Ms. Brittany Carasella, and the other is town administrator, Mr. Mayo. If meeting notices were not posted for Wakefield residents, I think both should answer for how that occurred without their noticing. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other people for public comment? Sherry, anyone online who wants to comment?
No, we have nobody.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to item number 6, warrant.
Madam Chair, move to approve the warrants for the annual town election for April 25th, 2023, and the annual town meeting for May 15th, 2023, as presented in the packet.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye, 7-0. Great, thank you. I'm taking chair prerogative, and we're going to skip down to item 8. So, Mr. Conway, if you could come up, and we'll go to the intermunicipal agreement this is the new father friendly amendment. So
Thank you very much.
We've gone that twice now.
I 3 times.
I'm just
No, just kidding.
counting my blessings.
Yeah.
So Joe Conway, Public Works Director, with me. Some of you all know Bill Renault, our town engineer. So we're here in front of you tonight with the final details to a project we've been working on and talking about for some time now. And we're going to respectfully request that the town council sign the intermunicipal agreement and let us start to realize some of the benefits that we're about to go through. I have a couple of quick talking points just to walk through. For anybody at home that may have not seen this, for most of you here, this is going to be redundant. Nothing is really materially changed, except for the date, I think, on the title slide itself. So just a little bit of history with this project. So late 2000, early 2021, the Linfield Center Water District approached Public Works about the feasibility of looking into a previously existing interconnect that we have between the two systems. It's located on Vernon Street at basically the intersection of Indian Lane and this old vintage one that was out there was actually underneath the bridge. So myself and Bill, for the most part, worked with Linfield to figure out is this feasible, is there hydraulic compatibility, and is partnering with them on something like this something that we're going to come back with a net benefit to Wakefield. So in this, we've achieved that, and we think we have something very advantageous to the town. And since that point, in early 2021, about May, we presented to you what we thought was going to be the final agreement. We were just waiting on Mass DOT to provide some comments because we have to go through there right away. And that took at least a year.
Yeah, that's weird.
Just about a year for them to weigh in. So outside of that, with a little bit of date changes, like I'd said, this is something that you've all seen before. So just quickly to touch on the construction. So phase 1 through 3 is really what's most important to us. Phase 4 is actually where the interconnect is going to happen. The first phase of this, we're talking about Bay State Road. So if anybody familiar with Bay State Road, it's up by Liberty Chevrolet. Essentially what we have there is a dead end. And then on Vernon Street in the area of 128, we have another dead end. So this project is going to bring those two pieces together and loop our system. So on phase 1, we're going to be installing approximately 1,400 feet of brand new water main. This is going to go from the dead end at the Elks to Main Street and Vernon Street, Main Street and Bay State Road in Linfield. From that point, phase 2 is a 2-part piece where it's going to be traveling south. We're going to go from that intersection underneath the bridge to the Saugus River crossing. And then in phase 3, we're actually going to abandon the approach of trying to go underneath the bridge, and we're going to come up out of the ground and strap on to the side. This is something that we've done on Hopkins Street. We have it on Merriam Street. It's insulated pipe and pretty much the standard. So for us, and we'll get to it in a few minutes, is something that being able to access this in the future versus what lies beneath all the infrastructure that MassDOT has is certainly something that's going to be important to us. And then lastly, when all of that is done being constructed, the Linfield Center Water District is initiated the MWA to become a member. And what they'll have is an interconnect somewhere just past the bridge in Linfield where they'll receive water and take it into their town. And that's supposed to happen sometime in 2023. Just really quickly, this whole project was something that certainly as I transitioned into my role and Bill came on, we kind of went through our whole water capital, our hydraulic study. We basically went through the whole thing to try to figure out where we stand, what are some projects that we need to do, where are some areas that we might have some vulnerability. This is just a snapshot from that. In the middle of that, you'll see next to the words Old Town Well Pumping Station, there's a circle with an X in that. So this is that Pierce Ave water main that we've talked about. This is something that was laid predating the highway, I think.
Predating the highway,
Yeah, so it's very old. It went cross country underneath the Saugus River, and then if we were to repair it, we'd have to go under the highway. This is something that is leaking somewhere. Public Works actually replaced all the water mains in 1998, 1999 on Bay State Road. It was looked at then, they talked about it, and the struggle to get in and through that terrain to do this project, they they deferred. So one of the things when we were doing our work was trying to figure out an alternative to recapture some of the benefits that gave us and not have to do that. And we actually came up with this exact plan. And then fortunately for us, the Linfield Center Water District was in a position where they were looking for a partner, and we happened to be sitting right at the door waiting to have a conversation. So really quick, just a couple of highlights in this agreement. So essentially what we're doing here, Wakefield is going to allow Linfield Center Water District to wheel water into the system from the MWRA. Essentially what this is the town of Wakefield just becomes a vessel to carry MWRA water to them. This is pretty standard. It happens in a whole bunch of different MWRA communities. For doing that, we're going to charge a markup to Linfield Center that's going to be paid quarterly to the town of Wakefield. All construction, design, permitting, from beginning to end is going to be the financial responsibility of Linfield Center. So the cost to the town of Wakefield is zero. My time, Bill's time meeting with you, and a couple other meetings, I could say that the amount of time we have invested in this is no greater than what we would put into working with a developer looking to develop a piece of property in a project that we necessarily don't see any benefit for. One of the requirements during negotiations, after everything was constructed, we wanted to own it, so we wanted everything to become ours. The town of Linfield will give us a granted location to be able to operate on that, and then the said agreement is for 20 years. And we've asked for that the rates be able to be reviewed in year 7, 12, and 16. Essentially what we want to be able to do is get a baseline for what's actually flowing through there and make sure that the percentage that we get on a flow component is appropriate, and if we find out that it's not appropriate, we want to have the conversation to see if we can change that. Payment, so I mentioned all the construction costs to be borne by the Linfield Center Water District for MWRA water. Essentially, what we came up with the payment is we took the wholesale rate per million gallons for what the MWRA charges its members, and we put a 20% surcharge on that. So for every million gallons that goes through, they will be a direct customer. This doesn't affect our assessment. There's no changes for Wakefield at all. But we'll get a reading from the MWRA, and then however many units go through there, we'll charge 20% of their rate and collect that. Right now, we estimate that return to be about $120,000 annually at this time. So some benefits, and jump in, Bill, if you got any more, but water system dynamics for us, for looping, the one thing we don't want to do design-wise through anything that we have in town, we want to eliminate dead ends. So we want the water to be moving. We want it to be at a constant state of flow. This project also provides an alternative to that Pierce Ave project that we talked about. I would think to do that, we're probably looking at a bonding, and you're probably talking multi-million dollars.
Yeah, probably upwards of 4 or 5 million.
Right. So this essentially eliminates that. We can abandon that forever. We don't have to deal with the Saugus River, any environmental impact, and we certainly don't have to deal with the highway. One of the big ones on this, there was a commercial piece of property in that area just before this kind of materialized, and they were doing a renovation to the building. They were increasing the square footage, and they were doing some flow tests for their sprinklers. And we discovered that we were deficient with a fire flow capacity on Bay State Road. What this project will end up doing by bringing our 2 points together will actually increase our flow in gallons per minute almost 4.5 times. So we'll go from teeter-tottering a razor-thin line of being out of compliance with NFPA to exceeding that tremendously. One thing I think that also can't be understated is, this project actually adds another intermunicipal connection for us. Reversely, should we ever have a bad situation happen within our own, we have another source that we can get to. So we have multiple points of redundancy with MWRA, Reading, Melrose, and even Stoneham. All of those are located to the west side of North Ave with the exception of one in Greenwood. We don't have anything on the east side of town. I don't believe we have anything with Saugus, and then we certainly don't have anything that we think is competent in this area. So this would put that in there. God forbid, we got a bad fire or a water break or something like that. We could actually flow water back to us to limit the amount of disruption that has. And then lastly, that I already talked about, but certainly not least, all the infrastructure would be then is going to be transferred to us, and that will just become part of our system that we own and we operate. So I know I went kind of quick, but Bill and I are here. If anybody has any questions, comments, concerns.
Counselor McLean.
Joe, just curious, agreement term is 20 years. What happens after 20? Renegotiate?
So the agreement term, what essentially Linfield Center wanted to do was make sure that they're going to be investing about $1 million in capital work for this to happen. So they wanted to make sure that after 3 years, essentially, that Wakefield wouldn't turn around and leave. So 20 years is pretty much the standard on these. At some point, probably around year 12 or year 15, I would say once we get a baseline of our operating, how things are going, and we're comfortable with it, we'll look to extend.
And when you talk about redundancy, that is just, the connection to Linfield gives us better water capacity in the event of a bad fire?
It's something that you hope that you never have to use, but in the event that we get in a jam, it's certainly nice to know that it's there, should we ever have to use it. So it's one of those better to have and not need than to need and not have type of situations.
That's all. Thank you.
Counselor Tynes.
Thank you for the presentation, also for kind of explaining this to the lay people on the council like myself.
That's what we're here for.
One question that I did want to ask is just the impact on the roadways. So Vernon Street was recently paved. If I'm looking at your map correctly, the installation that you're looking to do, is that in the other part of Vernon that wasn't paved, or are we going through, we're not going through and cutting the roadway where we've recently paved?
No, we knew this was coming along, so we
Awesome.
stopped short.
Great.
So what'll end up happening is like everything else in town, the final roadway restoration for the trenches is the responsibility of Linfield Center too. After that sits through the freeze cycle that we always talk about. Bill's group will design up the rest of that intersection to finish, and that'll be added into our paving program.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Welcome.
And potentially our sidewalk program, if there's any sidewalks that way
We already
that
did.
are on your list.
I believe we already did them.
Okay.
We extended sidewalks out that way, yeah, so I don't think
Great.
it shouldn't be a gap.
Yeah.
No, but I'll tell you, if they want to connect one under the bridge or something like that, we certainly have the conversation
Yeah.
with them for sure.
I
Similar to
feel-
kind of like North Ave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a gap at the bridge. I'm saying everything in town, in our town
In our
is
town,
covered.
yeah.
But if we
So
want to look at
it's
that,
something to think about as we prioritize sidewalks and pavement. Counselor Dombrowski.
I'll just add that I've had conversations with Joe about this over the last few months, I guess now, and I think it's really important just to underscore the fact that this is at no cost to our town. It's nothing but a benefit to our residents, and
Correct.
ultimately it becomes a revenue stream for us. So there's no compromised, water quality or
Improvement.
pressure. It's nothing but an improvement, and there's the added benefit of the redundancy as you've spoken about, and the revenue coming in through this contract. So I think it's a win-win-win for Wakefield, and I think it's important for people to recognize that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your good work on this too, because I know that there are a lot of components to this, and I think you had a lot of foresight to be able to understand where our town's needs were and how those could best be addressed by another community's engagement with us on their dollar.
Just two questions from me. One, so for our residents that live on Bay State Road, because we do have a couple, what does construction over the summer look like? Is it taking all summer? Is it they won't be able to exit? What's it look like?
So
I was just gonna. So it's a transmission main. So we don't have services that'll be coming off. So it's similar to what happened on North Ave last year. Was it last year that we did that? Yeah. So it's I'd say a couple of months worth of work there for the most part. But we just paved them, so they've had a little bit of disruption
Yeah.
last year as well. So
So you still kind of keep one lane open.
Yeah,
And
Yes.
then you
Yeah.
share,
Exactly.
there's directions
Yeah.
to a shared lane.
yeah, and it's a little better than a typical water main project. So like on Hopkins Street right now, where we're doing the services, and that's a lot more disruptive. That's because we have to do all those services.
Projects right now.
Yeah.
I
so-
I will say though, just as an aside on that, I really commend the DPW. I mean, just in terms of the communication to residents in our area, the contractors are really flexible over making sure people can get in and out. So they do a great job of making sure people have access.
Great. That's good.
I
To hear.
can't say it's no inconvenience, but it's
yes.
definitely, they do their best to mitigate it.
That's good feedback. And then my second question was, how was it dealing with the Linfield attorney?
So I think I mentioned it last time when we first got this idea. Out of respect to Tom, we weren't going to use Tom, and then Tom came in. And I think we can't say enough fantastic things about him. So it actually worked out better for us that we were able to work with him on this. It went pretty smooth, and there wasn't any familiarization with somebody neutral, but it was a nice added bonus for sure.
That's great. That's what we like to hear.
I've heard the guy in Linfield is a first-rate jerk.
At least he's first rate.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, and so do we have to take a vote? Yes, we do. Do I have a motion?
Yes, move to approve the proposed intermunicipal agreement with the Linfield Center Water District and Town of Linfield.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye, unanimous 7-0. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Great job, Joe. This really resolves a real issue in that whole area of town, too. And I noticed they didn't mention about paving Vernon Street in front of Jackson Lane at all. Thank
Jackson
God
Lane was
no
not
one asked the
mentioned.
question, yeah.
Okay, moving back to item number 7, appointments. We have, it is our annual time of reappointing and making new appointments to all of our committees and boards in town. I will go to Councillor Chines to
Sure.
make some recommendations.
First, with the Advisory Board of Public Works, move to appoint Shane McCarthy to a term on the Advisory Board expiring in 2026.
Second.
Any discussion? Councillor Dabrowski?
For these, can we just identify how many open slots we have? Yep, so this is one open slot. Right. So just for people watching. So
Yeah.
they
Sure,
understand. absolutely.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Good suggestion.
So
That's all.
we have a motion to appoint Shane McCarthy for the one open seat on the Advisory Board of Public Works. All in favor? Aye, 7-0. Great.
All right. Move to appoint Diana Kennedy and Jessica Sudich, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing anyone's name today, to terms on the Arts Council expiring in 2026.
Second.
And just as a point on that one, there is a third vacancy for a term expiring in 2025. So we had 2 applicants for those 3 spots.
Great. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye, 7-0. Great.
All right. Move to appoint to the Capital Planning Committee Dan Calore and Tracy Cleversey for 2 terms expiring in 2026, and Samuel Hockenberry for 1 term expiring in 2025.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Councilor Dabrowski?
I just want to say, with capital planning, I think this is an incredibly well-oiled machine. They do yeoman's work. It is very difficult to do what they do every year. They have requests that far exceed what they're allocated, and I think they do a really good job of balancing. I think they're very receptive to our priorities and what we indicate, as where we want to see dollars deployed, and I think that they're one of the finest committees that we have, and we have a lot of fine committees.
Second to everything Councilor Dombrowski said. I went to one of their meetings. I went to 2 of their meetings this year, and they are very well run. They do a great job. Have really great discussion about the projects that need to happen. So, really glad that we are appointing 3 new members, 3 additional
2
members.
returning and 1
Yeah,
new.
yeah. All in favor? Aye. 7-0. Great.
Just before making the motion on the next one for the CATV Advisory Committee, Sherry, are you able to confirm just how many, do we have a defined number of vacancies for that? I know there wasn't a listing of terms on that one, and so I wasn't quite sure what we were appointing and when.
Right, yeah. I know Steve had a conversation with Tom Mullen on this today.
Yeah, I'm gonna-
Steve, do you have any?
Tom just stepped out. Why don't we skip over that?
Okay.
I think that's
Okay,
Okay.
there's not a definite number, but Tom was gonna
Let's
check
come
on
back
that.
to that
great.
one
Just
then.
want to make sure I'm
Right.
making the correct motion on that one. All right, move to appoint to the Commission on Disabilities, Lois Benjamin, Paul Paglarani, excuse me, and Dan Benjamin for 3 vacancies with terms expiring in 2026.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye, 7-0.
Move to appoint to the Conservation Commission Frank Luciani and Ken Alipides to two slots with terms expiring in 2026.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just again, I'm going to apologize for any names that I'm butchering here.
I do want to point out that our application form that we created a couple of years ago, I think when Councilor Dabrowski was chair, maybe, we've added 2 lines for people to actually put in their pronunciations, and some people have done that. So if you have a name like Maureen that's not so obvious to people, feel free to use that line as you communicate with us. Okay, just no discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
7-0. Thank you.
All right, Madam Chair, move to appoint to the Council on Aging Julie Brown and Jim Moran to 2 positions with terms expiring in 2026.
Second.
Any discussion? And all in favor? Aye, 7-0. Great.
All right. Move to appoint to the Environmental Sustainability Committee Christina Oliveri and Stefan Spears for 2 positions with terms expiring in 2026, and Lillian Gunther to 1 position with a term expiring in 2024.
Second.
And Julie, as the liaison, do you want to talk about the recommendation?
Yes, so the names that Councilor Chines just read out were recommended by the Environmental Sustainability Committee. So that is, that we actually had 4 applicants for 3 positions, which is always tough, but we really encourage the other applicant to stay involved. We actually have a formal volunteer program now for the ESC.
So if you are interested in that and you applied, you should reach out to the chair
Yes,
or Julie as liaison and find ways to still be involved.
absolutely. Yep, there's our email is on the website.
Any further questions, comments? All in favor? 7-0. Great.
All right. Move to appoint to 1 open position on the Fence Viewing Committee with a term expiring in 2026, Paul Taraka.
Second.
Second, great. Any discussion? And Steve, I'm looking to you for your annual comment.
Well, I'm happy that the members that I know on this committee are a little taller than we had some ones that was hard for them to look over the fences before, so I worry about them. No, but actually, this is a committee that we actually refer to, fairly often when there's an issue between neighbors about the fence, where the fence is, and they actually kind of help soften it and give some nice reports. So it's actually very helpful to us.
Great, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 7-0. Great, thank you.
All right. Move to appoint to the Historical Commission Nancy Bertrand and Therese Frazier to 2 voting positions expiring in 2026.
Second.
Any discussion?
And just to clarify, both are currently on the Historical Commission, but Ms. Frazier is in a non-voting position, so we'd be appointing her to the voting position.
Thank you for that clarification. All in favor? Aye, 7-0.
All right. Oops, sorry, let me scroll down. Move to appoint to the Human Rights Commission Jessica Sudich and Jillian Diamond for 2 positions with terms expiring in 2026, and Olivia Dannenberg to 1 position with a term expiring in 2025.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye, 7-0. Thank you.
Move to appoint to the Permanent Building Committee to 4 positions expiring in 2026, Charles Tarbell, Mark Macchio, Phil Renzi, and Erin Demerjian.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye, 7-0.
All right. And move to appoint to the Recreation Commission Richard Stevens, Susan Hickey, and Gerald Barrett to 3 positions with terms expiring in 2026, and Erin McDonough to 1 position with a term expiring in 2024.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? 7-0.
Move to appoint to the Veteran Advisory Board Robert Ettinger and Christy Yentile to 2 positions with terms expiring in 2024. Mark Young and Marion Dennehy for 2 positions with terms expiring 2025. And Paul Cancellieri, Dale Finley, and Christopher Olson to 3 positions with terms expiring in 2026.
Second.
Any discussion? I will just like to say that Paul Cancellieri actually used the phonetic pronunciation on his form, so we all know how to say it. It's Cancellieri. Love that.
I always say Cancellier, so
So now you know. He has told us all how we should say it the correct French way, I'm guessing?
Italian.
Cancellieri.
Oh, Italian.
But it's an E, not an I.
Fine.
Okay, all in favor of the Veteran Advisory Board, 7-0. Thank you.
All right, and well, last but not least, until we go back, move to appoint to the Zoning Board of Appeals David Hatfield and Thomas Lucy to 2 positions with terms expiring in 2026.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye, 7-0. Thank you. And then going back up to the Cable Advisory Committee, Tom, we had a question for you.
So we were wondering if there is any definitive number of positions or term timetables for the Cable Advisory Committee.
See, I can't find any thing about that in either the charter or the bylaws. So I think you have liberty to be creative.
All right. So I'm going to make sorry. I was going to make a motion, and I will be more than happy to take an amendment to this motion. But I move to appoint Shane McCarthy, William Redding, and Eric Reed to the Cable Advisory Committee, and we'll move to make those terms non-coterminous. So just completely arbitrarily move to appoint Shane McCarthy to a term expiring in 2024, William Redding to a term expiring in 2025, and Eric Reed to a term expiring in 2026.
Second.
Any discussion? Counselor Dombrowski?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Mullen. I know we had spoken before about the idea of kind of almost like reconstituting this committee or rethinking, its purpose. Since we don't have much like that's sounds like defined like in the charter or otherwise, do we have the ability, not tonight but at a subsequent meeting, to just go ahead and do that to more broadly expand what the charge of this committee would be?
Oh, absolutely. You can you do have the freedom to restructure, indeed to abolish a committee like that. Probably the only thing that I'd hesitate to see any town council do would be to remove an individual absent, really good cause determined after a hearing. But if you're exercising your discretion to restructure, to repurpose, even to abolish the committee, I think that's within your discretion.
And that's the case with most committees, say ZBA or some of the others that are more prescriptive via, say, statute or
Right. Well,
bylaw,
right. So there's a statute for
Charter.
the ZBA. There's a statute for the Conservation Commission. So we have to follow those statutes. But with respect to any committee or commission, any public body that is prescribed only by our bylaws, provided that we adhere to what the bylaw says, you're fine. And if a committee doesn't exist in the bylaws or in the statutes, then it's entirely up to you.
So I would just ask, Madam Chair, at a future meeting, we have a more in-depth conversation about this, keeping in mind WCIT's ongoing needs and what
Yes.
it looks like going forward.
Yes, and just to tell everyone, we have had conversations that post-budget town meeting, we will look at this and form with the Cable Advisory Committee, maybe like an informal working group that has, if any of my colleagues are interested in serving, Erin Kakinda, the Economic and Community Development person, Steve, members of the school committee who also get some money from that cable line item. Yes, we are committed to that. We'll talk more about it after the budget process. So we have a motion and it was seconded. Any other conversation? All in favor? 7-0. Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan, for doing all of that.
Oh, thank you, and thank you to everyone who applied. I mean, it was great to see all the candidates and read all the resumes. A lot of talent in town, which is wonderful.
So thank everyone that applied. There's always ways to get involved. If you weren't able to be a voting member, there are volunteers. Human Rights Commission, Environmental Sustainability Group are always looking for people. Everyone who got appointed should be looking in their inbox for an email from Sherry with more information about how to get sworn in and when your next meeting will officially be that you can attend. Councilor Dombrowski.
I just wanted to add that I know that we've talked about this before, and I think, Sherry, these applications have been available for a very long time, like months. People could be applying, and some of them, I think, could date back to January. I'm just really concerned about how the number of applicants we've had in the pool, and a lot of repeats, which I think is great because I think it goes to show that people are finding the work that they're doing to be fulfilling, and we're incredibly indebted to them for that. But and it makes our job easier, obviously. But I do wish that we had more people that were applying, especially newer unfamiliar names to us. And I don't know the best way that we can do our outreach going forward. I know we've talked about this before, but when you look at this, it's a tough nut to crack for us. But I would like to see us be able to have more people and more choices for us to be making in the best possible way. And I think right now, unfortunately, there's probably a little bit of apathy in terms of volunteerism for a number of reasons, and I don't know how we best improve that. And maybe that's through a communication strategy, but I know these applications have been out for so long, so I don't know what more we can be doing, but I feel like something to think about.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 9, Town Administrator Performance Review. Councilor Chines.
Sure, thank you. So just as background, I think for folks that are watching, and maybe as a reminder for all of us, in Town Administrator Mayo's contract that we just approved, one of the things that we did was created a more formal process around doing a performance management evaluation for the town administrator. And the way the process worked out was within the agreement, we actually defined out a set of core job responsibilities, that we looked at as, collectively as important for the role, and also a process by which we, the town council, would evaluate on that in consultation and meeting with Steve as well. So what we have to present today is sort of the aggregated evaluation form from the town council as a whole. So what this represents is a consolidated view of all of the individual evaluations that each of the members of the town council put together. Again, I know many of us, if not all of us, actually met with Steve as well to share our individual feedback and to talk through any issues of concern. But so what's represented here in terms of the ratings that are represented, those really represent just an average of the individual ratings that we as town council gave. And the comments are basically verbatim the comments that we all wrote in our individual evaluations, except where, we all said a lot of the same things. I did some editorial consolidation for the benefit of anyone trying to read this. The document itself is available in the packet and obviously has been shared with Steve. And so my intention today is not to read through it, but maybe just to hit upon some of the highlights and then open it up for discussion for the council, for Steve, for anyone else to share any additional comments or share any feedback. So with that, the way the evaluation is structured, it's divided into a number of sections where we did an evaluation for that section, and then there's an overall evaluation as well. So the first section that we evaluated Steve on was fiscal management. This was, I think, universally seen by all members of the council as an area of incredible strength on Steve's part. Rating of greatly exceeds expectations, which personally, from my own perspective, was well earned. A couple of things that members of the council highlighted. The entire budget process is incredibly well organized. We as a town council have great visibility into really all the changes that go into the budget through the process, starting with the tri-board meeting, but then really carrying through as we do individual budgets, as forecasts get updated and so forth. The budget itself is a transparent document. We've got line-by-line specificity, and so that was something else that people highlighted as important. The fact that we have strong discipline and financial controls in place, certainly something that we see both in the end results of things like maintaining the AAA bond rating, but even in some of the documentation around what we do from a budget standpoint. Councilor Vincent and I have both done approval of warrants, and I think both of us would highlight the fact that the documentation that's in those warrants, and again, the level of specificity around what we're spending and what it ties back to is incredibly thorough. Members of the council talked about, some of the skills around financial management coming through in the process leading up to the high school vote, both in terms of tying back to ways in which we can mitigate the effect on residents through communication around the senior circuit breaker and senior property tax exemption, and also around the way that we designed, I should say we, Steve, you and your team designed the bonding plan so that, we're being mindful of minimizing the residential tax impact up front, and also hopefully taking advantage of reducing interest rates over time. And then just as we look to the future, another piece of feedback that was given was, trying to make sure that we're continue to be deliberate, thoughtful, and really comprehensive around applying for state grants, other state funds to offset rising expenses, and that's an area of opportunity for us. Second component of the review was human resources management, where here the aggregate rating was meets expectations. A couple of things that were highlighted was the thoughtful and strategic approach to our collective bargaining agreements, an approach that balances both our financial and fiscal priorities and realities, with also the need to make sure that we're recruiting and retaining high quality staff, particularly in a labor market. We talked about the importance of consistency and the fact that we're treating all of our respective unions fairly in the negotiations that Steve manages through the town administration. Highlighted really the excellent leadership team, Steve, that you've built. Really strong folks, that you've hired for your direct reports. Also the job that you've done in instilling a positive culture in town hall, both through how you work with your direct reports, but also through your example. Finally, we talked about another strength is the fact that we have a more open process of hiring now than perhaps we've had in years past, and that's produced some really great candidates for some key jobs. Some areas for work and kind of continued enhancement over the next couple of years. One is around specificity on job descriptions and performance evaluations, including making sure that we have a process for sort of goal setting and development planning for each direct report. Succession planning being another really important thing to focus on, both for the town administrator position, but also all of our key core administrative positions in town. We have an excellent personnel manual that's up to date and outstanding, but another thing that was highlighted was the importance to make sure that we continue evolving around diversity, equity, inclusion, and making sure that that's part of our processes around managing our employees and managing our own performance. Next was communications management. Here was a rating of exceeds expectations. This was one where if we look at where we are compared to where we were only a few years ago, we've really improved by leaps and bounds. And I think that's a credit, Steve, to your leadership and also the fact that we've staffed up in this area. Folks highlighted some specific events that really, we thought were incredibly effective at reaching out to residents, including Wakefield 101 and Town Day. Also highlighted the fact that we've really been kind of a leader among surrounding communities in soliciting resident feedback around things like how do we use ARPA funds, the vision process, and the master planning process. This is probably the biggest gold star in all of this, but the timeliness in responding to requests. I think someone wrote, it seems like you respond in like real time when you hear from any members of the town council, which is probably way beyond what you need to do, especially when we're, emailing you at 11 o'clock at night on a weekend. But also, with residents as well. Town hall gets back to people in a timely way. We set a standard of 2 business days, and I think we exceed that by leaps and bounds. There was some comment that we want to make sure that when we're responding, we're also responding though with complete information and minimizing sort of follow-ups. And my line of work, when we talk about patient services, we talk about first call resolution, and I think that's something we want to make sure we continue working on, making sure we're responding timely, but also completely to council requests and resident requests. A couple other areas of opportunity. Continuing to evolve our presence on social media, which we know is a place where many people get much of their information. Again, leaps and bounds improvement over where we've been, but opportunity there. And also opportunity to continue sort of, touting our accomplishments in town and the good things that are happening and making sure that we're being proactive about sharing the things in town that we should be proud of, because there is a lot. Fourth section was operations management. Again, a rating of exceeds expectations. Members of the council commented on the ability to maintain uninterrupted services during the pandemic. The fact that part of our ethos now is the ability to pivot, and our departments are flexible. They adjust to changing circumstances. And if something isn't working, there's a can-do mindset around figuring it out, which I think has been great. Response times, we talked about it from a communication standpoint, but even, calls to police, fire, emergency management, DPW, all of those response times remain exceptional, which is terrific. The DPW in particular has identified a lot of clear ways to communicate problems with the DPW by phone, by web form, by email, kind of a no wrong door approach that we've noticed. I think that's an opportunity where I think we'd love to hear as a council more on what some of those requests are, some trending and tracking on the types of service requests that they get. Couple other things highlighted, best practices for emergency management and disaster recovery operations, really a testament to the great work of Tom Walsh, but the fact that this is part of, again, our ongoing discipline in town is terrific. And also, kudos to the IT team for maintaining a strong security posture and also starting the process of migrating to cloud-based services, which we think will improve both our reliance on locally hosted services and the servers and the risks that those entail, and also enhance data security. Looking ahead, there was a sense of wanting to make sure that we got more of a regular debrief on town property, buildings, and other facilities so that we know what's there, what's being used how, particularly as we think about some of the vacant properties that we have in town, like the Hurd School. Also looking at the survey of town-owned land and getting an understanding of what that landscape, no pun intended, looks like. Finally, in terms of the discrete sections, ethical standards, again, exceeds expectations rating from the council, highlighted the new electronic process for employees and officials to complete the ethics training online, both the state process, but then also, Sherry, the great work that you do. So I know this is Steve's evaluation, but we're going to give Sherry some kudos for that. The fact that Sherry's kind of keeping us all up to date, all members of all councils, because it isn't just, the 7 of us here. This is another area, too, where I think we as a council would like to get more updates just on our compliance with, state procurement laws, how we're doing in terms of town employees and officials doing the ethics training and so forth. Overall, the overall rating netted out to an exceeds expectations, and I think we've highlighted some of the reasons for that, but just a couple of things, again, to reiterate. Many of us have, worked with other public officials and other levels of government. Many of us know town administrators in other towns, and the feedback not only that we hear, but I think that we observe is that Steve, you are one of the best, and we're fortunate about to have you for that reason. The financial management skills really are a hallmark of the great work that you do. We are in a very good position, because of the contributions of obviously a lot of folks, not the least of which are the finance committee and our colleagues on the school committee, but certainly the work, Steve, that you and your financial team do. We've gone through a very successful and I think very open and transparent process around the high school approval, which again is a testament to the great work of the school department, but also Steve, for you. I mean, this was a team effort, and your leadership was critical to it. The responsiveness again was a key highlight, and the culture that you've built around service and excellence and respect for residents is another thing. So I will close it there and let people comment. But again, just generally all around positive comments. A couple of areas of opportunity for town administrator and town council to collectively work on. But I think the feedback that I got in reading through and kind of compiling all of the comments was generally very positive about the direction we're going in. And again, Steve, the leadership that you exhibit.
Thank you.
Any of my counselors want to add anything?
I think we said it all.
Jonathan, that was a great overview. Thank you.
I was just going to thank Jonathan for putting it all together, because I know,
Well,
I think I was probably verbose and everybody was.
No, it was a pleasure, and I think everyone took a lot of time on this, which I appreciate as a group that we as a council really spent some good time on this, and clearly there was a lot of thought and an insight in the comments that people made. So I was happy to help put all of everyone's great work on one piece of paper.
Thank you.
Councilor Dombrowski.
I would just say, John, thank you for your work. There's a lot to compile, and you did a great job with that. Thank you. And Steve, just knowing other town administrators, town managers, and even mayors, so many other communities would be dying to have this kind of an evaluation of their leader. So the fact that, as our CEO, these are the rather universal comments of this executive body, I think speaks a lot for you. I do think you are the best at what you do. I know that other communities turn to you when they have questions. You are the dean of local town administration, and it matters a lot. What you're doing has consequential impacts, and the budgeting especially, and you and I have spoken about this many times, though, the budgeting especially has a profound impact on taxpayers, every one of them. And you see a lot when you're going through these budgets, but there's so much more behind the scenes that you're working on. Not just the AAA bond rating, which obviously at this point I don't even know how much it saved the average taxpayer, hundreds upon hundreds of thousands, if not probably millions at this point, I think, millions probably with the AAA. But just the deliberate nature with which you go through the budgeting process with your department heads, the mutual respect that you have with the department heads when they're compiling these budgets. Going back to FinCom, I can remember you talking about you making it clear that the culture was, don't try to just use up all your money, because otherwise you'll lose it. We don't approach things that way. And the collaborative nature that you don't see that in a lot of other places, or a lot of other organizations for that matter. So I'll just echo what my colleagues have obviously conveyed through Jonathan. We're very fortunate to be in the position that we are as a town financially, and that is in large part because of your steady-handed leadership through a lot of quite turbulent times. So thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank the council. You guys do a lot of work that goes on that the people don't know about. It's not just coming to a meeting every couple of weeks. You spend a lot of time. I do appreciate every one of you spoke with me individually, and I do appreciate that. I do have a fabulous team. I want to thank them. They work so hard. They care so much, and we spend a lot of time, talking about how we can make things better, and it spills over into our social lives, which is maybe too bad, but that's what we have. So we look forward to working together and making this even better next year, and improving on the areas that we do need to a little bit improvement on. So we will attack those first. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, just as a next step, I know, again, this is the aggregated evaluation is in our packet, and I know it is available, or will be available publicly as well for anyone who's interested in reading it too. But thank you
Thank
for
you.
working with us through the
Thank you.
process, and I think making it, one where, I think we were able to have a lot of good discussions individually with you around, how to improve moving forward and, how to take, I think what has been a very good year for our community and build upon it.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. We're going to move on. Item number 10, license.
We can't embarrass Steve more.
No, he's turning red. We'll save it for next year. Item 10, license.
Madam Chair, move to approve the change of manager application for the Knights of Columbus.
Second.
Great. Any discussion? Sherry, they've got everything in. Everything's copacetic. I'm taking Counselor Dabrowski's
Yeah.
question.
You're reading
I was waiting. I was waiting. Great. Okay. All in favor? Aye, 7-0. Great. Item number 11, donations.
Madam Chair, move to accept a donation, move to approve a request to donate library discards from the BB Library to the Friends of the Library.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? 7-0. Thank you.
And on the other side, move to accept and expend a gift or gifts to the library in the amount of $410 from various donors with thanks.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? 7-0. Thank you. Item number 12, approval of minutes.
Move to approve the minutes of the March 27, 2023 Town Council meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Aye, 7-0. Thank you. Item number 13, fiscal year 2024 budgets.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Before you this evening are 4 budgets that we're looking to update. Those being the assessing department, inspectional services, recreation, and library. The reason why they're back in front of you is because these are all personneled by members of the supervisory union, which has been settled. They were not, contract was not settled when we looked at these budgets, maybe back at the beginning of our odyssey in January, I think. These are some of the earlier ones. So if it pleases the chair, we've been through them before, what I'd like to do is maybe just go through the increase, let you know that, and then answer any questions. And maybe if I pose that, maybe Jonathan can make the motion as presented, if that's okay.
That's great. Yes.
So the assessors, which is the first one in front of it that has 1 member that is in the union, and the motion would be to increase the personal services section by $2,448 to $2,574, and that would make the total budget $249,924 for fiscal year 24.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you. The next one will be inspectional services, which has 3 people that are members of this this union. This would be your building inspector, your plumbing and gas inspector, and your wiring inspector. And the motion would be to increase personal services by $10,336 to $442,543, making the total budget $467,443.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? 7-0.
I might say that department continues to be extremely busy. I think fees for this year have been like $1.1 million so far. We budgeted, we forecast the beginning of the year for the building department about $600,000. So that's a good spot for us right now. And that does not include basically any building fees for the Head of the Lake project. So I'm kind of hoping that goes into next fiscal year, actually, at this point. But we'll see what happens. They're getting close to filing. The next one is recreation. Increase personal services by $3,107 to $125,896. Total budget would be $125,750. excuse me, 696, 125, 696. Again, recreation, fabulous job by our rec director. There's going to be such another explosion this summer of and spring of different programs, including ones that my grandkids are in, and I really care much more about them than I did about my kids. I say that all the time, and they know it. But great programs there.
Well, move to approve the revised but Recreation Department budget for fiscal 2024 as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Counselor Dombrowski?
Steve, quick question. Do we have a sense of what the revenue is on that?
Yes, we do.
And is it all from pickleball?
It's no, not all.
Doesn't hurt though.
Yeah, the fees are well over $500,000 a year.
Okay.
And that covers a lot of the programs and also, covers some other items there too.
Because I think this is important context as we're looking at
Yeah.
the percentage increase, but looking at that through the prism of
Yeah.
what we're receiving, through
Yeah.
revenue, I think that's helpful. Okay.
That's very good.
Thank you.
And the fees, Steve, go into a revolving account.
Yes.
From which we pay.
We pay for
all
the,
the other
for
stuff.
all the other programs.
Right.
So, yeah.
And just to say, not related to the revenue, but if anyone ever needs help paying for a fees,
Oh.
they should talk to Dan McGrath.
Absolutely.
Because we also
Absolutely.
keep room for that to make sure that we're
We
inclusive
certainly
as
do.
possible.
We certainly
Yeah.
do. Yep. We certainly do.
Okay, so we have a motion, a second. Any other questions on the recreational budget? All in favor? Aye, 7-0. Thank you. And budget 34.
Library, and there are two members of this union that are in the library. We would increase the personal services with the library to $1,424,695 for a total budget of $1,933,734, with $1,871,449 from the tax levy and $62,285 from available funds.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye, 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will say that with all of the budgets that you have seen and approved to date, you should feel very good about bringing in the town side at this point, with the caveat that we have a couple of unions out there that aren't settled, bringing that side in at 2.84%. It's pretty good,
That's great.
including health
Really
insurance,
great.
including those others, so great job on your part. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 14, Wakefield Schools. Are we joined by people via Zoom?
Yes, we have Doug with us. Doug, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Yes, we can.
Great. We're supposed to have Christine Bufagna and Tom Markham joining us as well.
Okay, so nobody else is on at the moment.
Okay. For the sake of time, I can get started if that's okay with you.
That would be great, Doug. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for presenting the slide deck. And so this is an abbreviated slide deck, just really updating the proposal that we plan to make at town meeting. Our budget was accepted by school committee a little over a week ago. Just want to kind of update you, town council, on what our goals are and budget priorities are moving forward. Next slide, please. So this evening, we're just going to share budget priorities that align to the WPS district and instructional strategies, explain, the proposed budget priorities for FY24, share some forecasting for FY24 and 24, 25, and 26. This is one of the things that has come up in regard to our planning. We're going to kind of talk about the collaboration that we've had and the feedback that we've gotten from our FinCom subcommittee, as well as Steve in this process. And there'll be time at the end for answers. I would be remiss before I jump too deeply into these slides to say, Steve, congratulations on your evaluative comments. I think that they're more than well-deserved, and I think you're a great help in our budget as well. So thank you,
Thank you.
and congratulations.
Thank you.
I know it's super uncomfortable for you there.
Yeah.
I'm watching you. Yeah. So, but congratulations, well-deserved.
We
Next slide,
appreciate you
please.
taking a moment to make him
Yeah.
uncomfortable
Yeah.
here about
Can
this.
I, before you go on, Doug, Sherry, are we joined by the FinCom liaison?
No, but we are joined right now with, by Christine Bufagna.
Oh, great.
Great.
Christine, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes,
So
we can. Great.
WCAT, we can barely, inside the studio, we can barely see them on the screen. It's not that important as long as that we can see the speaker, but
Okay. So Christine, I'm 2 slides in. So next slide, please. So the priorities for FY24 are similar, very similar to the town. We're looking at creating opportunities for intervention and serving students. We're looking at ways to extend the school day and the school year for students that need particular help post-COVID. We're looking at ways to accelerate students that are ready to be accelerated at elementary, middle, and high. We're looking at academic achievement, social, emotional, and behavioral success for all students. And this year we have we've secured grant funding through a partnership with 2 other districts, Melrose and Stoneham. And this grant is coordinated by our local Board of Health. And so I think you might be off. I think you might be ahead 1 slide. Can you go back 1? There you go. Thank you so much. And so, and this year, we're also, in addition to the grant-funded counselor that we're getting at the high school, we're also looking at 2 FTEs in this budget, and only 2. And these are, we're hiring in these spaces to really save money in special education by really building out programming. And you'll see more on this in the coming slides. But we're also adding an English language learner teacher, an EL teacher, to support our growing population of EL students. When I arrived here 8 years ago, all students were served at the elementary level at Woodville. Now we have services that are provided in every elementary school. And our population is almost doubled as well. So we're looking at about 130 students at this point right now, and families as well. So next slide, please. So I'm just trying to see. Our challenge, like Steve was talking about, this is a labor market and a labor budget. And so we're looking to recruit, retain, and develop outstanding teachers. What happens in the classroom is really the lifeblood of our programming. And so you will hear, as you've heard from other bargaining units, being able to hire and retain personnel is really job 1 for us in this budget. We're also looking to continue preventative maintenance on buildings that we've started during COVID. And just a reminder, that just kind of, we are always reminded by FinCom and others, the size of our budget is about $50 million, or this year our proposal is a $50 million budget. And so, but we're serving 3,300 and almost 70 students in grades pre-K through 12 and post-academy. So that's quite a few students, and so as well as 600 employees. Next slide, please. So we talk about knowns and unknowns. The knowns this year, challenges are human resources and personnel. We need to create schedules to provide increased opportunities for students. I had talked about lengthening the school day and the school year for students. We need to prioritize professional development and teacher collaboration to further tap into the capacity that we have in our kind of teacher leader spaces. We need to maintain and possibly increase technology supports to maintain our initial investment. This year we added Power School, which is a huge upgrade for us. And we used to have iPass, which was a system that was about 3 decades beyond where it should have been in regard to renewing. And so in terms of the unknowns, human resources, we have positions that I'm asked this question often. Doug, is there a shortage in personnel, or do you have difficulty hiring? And the answer is yes, right? But it really depends on positions. Our ability to hire certain positions is really, really difficult. Where in the past we used to get 15 or 30 competitive applicants for hard to hire positions, we're now getting 2 or 3. And they're often at the top of the pay scale. And so other unknowns are kind of the needs of students, and as they are expanding, we need to expand in-district programming. So our out-of-district costs have absolutely skyrocketed. The state has estimated out-of-district tuitions to increase this year between 11 and 14%, which is really beyond what anyone had anticipated. We're also looking at an increase in cost for goods and services. As you know, the economy as kind of things get more expensive around the globe, it affects us in schools as well as it does the town. Next slide, please. Just looking at challenges and beyond, we are really taking a close look at school safety and cyber safety. We think that these go hand in hand. We're really concerned with what's happening around the state and around the country in regard to ransomware attacks on schools and municipalities. And we are doing a cyber assessment, and I think we'll collaborate on the town with that. I know Jeff and Todd work very closely and well together. We're also looking at school safety. We're doing an audit right now on all of our buildings in regard to access, locks, and really looking at school safety across the board. And so, and a number of these I've mentioned already, so I won't mention them again. The fourth bullet down, we have progressed and super pleased at the collaborative work that we've been able to do with all stakeholders to get the high school accepted by the town. And we really feel like this is going to address accreditation and accessibility for the years to come. And so we're looking at the high school, we're looking at Portrait of a Graduate, and we're looking at early college and internships for students in high school. And we're really kind of taking a hard look, a long-term look at special education and EL support for students. Really thinking about how we're onboarding families who need EL support. And we're thinking about ways of bringing them in the summer before students get started, and really touring families around schools and talking about all of the services that we have available. And we will be we'll be continuing in our Acceleration Academy grant that we got from the Department of Education for the last 2 years. We believe that that's going to be coming out in the coming month. And that really gives our new students, our kindergarten students, an opportunity to come in. It's like a soft opening. They come in and we cut the classes in half. So they're with smaller groups. And so they'll come in for a week before school starts. And it's a great opportunity for us when kids start school. There's considerably less anxiety. They know who's in their class. Students really are able to find their way around and know the adults. So we've been very fortunate in that space. Next slide, please. So I discussed this a moment ago. We're looking at 2 new positions in this year. One is special education, the other is EL, an EL teacher. Next slide, please. And this is an important slide because I think this, I hope, can answer some of the questions that were discussed a few weeks back at one of your town council meetings. I was able to catch to watch the meeting after it had taken place. And so we had an opportunity, Steve Mayo and I had an opportunity to debrief. We worked with our FinCom liaisons. Jim Sullivan is in that group. We have Doug Butler. We have Mr. Boudry, and we have one more gentleman. Who is our fourth on our?
Brian Cusack.
Brian Cusack.
Thank you so much, Brian, who's been on there for a number of years. So we've had an opportunity to go back at our initial budget proposal and really kind of look at ways that we can offset the budget and really kind of change the nature of what we had proposed to school committee. And so Tom Markham is also in the ranks as a school business administrator, so it's tremendously helpful for us. But Christine, do you want to talk about the proposal in the last bullet?
Sure. Can everyone hear me? So we're just talking about the proposal that we presented to the school committee, and we talked with the town about possible reductions in '24, about looking for ways to access some of our revolving accounts. I know there's been some talk about balances in revolving accounts because over the past couple of years, the changing in our demographics has changed, the changing in our programs have changed, the changes in our COVID funding grants have changed. So we were accessing some of those balances that we were able to have grow over the past 2 to 3 years. So because of that, we've asked school committee to work with us next year in reducing our budget ask from 50 million 90,191 to 49,590,191. So it's a reduction of $500,000. And we're going to work on looking at that, working at the Wakefield Academy revolving accounts and looking at some of our other accounts and then how we can access that. We can't really access revenues. So what we're going to do is look at charging those programs for things that they couldn't really afford to be charged before, custodial overtime accounts, maybe some utility charges, because those programs start really early in the mornings and stay late at night. So we're really going to kind of do some deep analysis about what those programs can sustain in '24. Now we know that's not sustainable moving forward, but it's going to help us for the next budget cycle. And happy to answer any more questions about that.
We have a few more slides. We'll be done in a moment. Tom, do you want to add anything about the work we've done collaboratively here?
No, no, not right now, Doug, thanks. I'll certainly add in at the end. Thank you.
Thanks. Next slide, please. So this is an important slide because this is an infographic that really demonstrates us building out programming intentionally over time. As you can see in green on the right-hand column for WMHS, we're looking at expanding programs in 25 and 26, as well as 26 and 27, as we have students that are kind of getting to high school age. So we've built this out over time to really welcome students and be prepared for them to come from a middle school program to a high school program. And those will be future costs. Next slide, please. So we've included this also. This was an addition. And so we want to be clear, and we're very pleased that as we have many challenges and there's never enough resources, we're pleased that with all of our rising costs, there was an increase in our Chapter 70 aid by $700,000, which is a real help to us. Next slide, please. So this is kind of a comparative summary of our FY23 and our FY24 proposed budget. You will see in FY24, you will see contractual services and materials and supplies have essentially been level funded. And the reason that is because personnel and personnel services, this is a labor budget. And this is us planning for the increases of what we believe it's going to cost to start what is going to be a 3-year teacher contract. So next slide, please. Happy to answer any questions that anyone may have. Tom, do you want to add now or after we close?
No, after we close, Doug's fine. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you.
Counselor Chines, as liaison, do you want to say anything?
Sure. So, I've spent a lot of time with this budget so far. Met with Dr. Lyons a few weeks ago. Sat in virtually on the school committee meetings where the budget's been reviewed, and so I, have gone through the full document, the 60 pages or so that are posted on the website. I think a couple of points in context on the budget that I think are particularly salient. One is the challenges that we see with the increasing number of ELL students and also in special education. Doug mentioned our ELL population has basically doubled over the last 10 years. And one thing that I think is really important to recognize is that the size of the EL population is actually one of the drivers around the state Chapter 78 formula. So I think the state recognizes that there is an enormous amount of resources that go into supporting an EL population. So the fact that that is a larger part of our population is something that's really important to keep in mind. Both for this budget, for the request for one of those additional positions, but also to understand the fact that our state aid is increasing by 800,000, I think reflects the fact that the state expects that we're going to be spending more in this area because of the level of need. Special ed, I think, is an enormous challenge. We've talked for a couple of years about, COVID and the impact that has on students that have, learning difficulties in this area, and I think that's something that continues to this day. Doug talked about the fact that out-of-district tuition costs are increasing dramatically is another huge issue, and this is something actually that we've been talking about within the Mass Municipal Association Fiscal Policy Committee as well, because those 11% plus increases for tuition are really crippling for a lot of districts. And so, we've heard over the last couple of years that we've had a deliberate strategy around trying to invest to keep students in district. In Wakefield, I think the fact that we're seeing such large increases for out-of-district tuition placements, is an indication that that strategy is probably more important now than ever, given the uncertainties of what we see outside. Just the final point, I'll have some specific questions later, but just the final point that I want to make just from a liaison perspective, Doug put up the slide showing sort of the foundation budget increase from the state. And that, I think, I look at that in some ways as almost kind of an objective standard of how much does the state think the cost of education in Wakefield should be increasing based on the mix of students that we have, the services that we have to offer, and so forth. And the budget that the school department has proposed and that the school committees accepted for presentation at town meeting is actually pretty much in line with the increase to the foundation budget. And so again, just as an objective standard around where we think we should be, I think we are sort of in that range. I know certainly, we've been lucky to talk about on the town side of the ledger, the budgets that we approve. We're at a lower number, and some of that is luck. Some of that is the fact that the dynamics are different for some of the budgets that we've approved. But again, I think when you look at this budget within context of the population we have, the challenges that we have, I think it's responsible. I think it's appropriate, and I think it invests in the areas that we need to invest in to make sure that we're positioning ourselves as best we can for the future. So, I just appreciate the work that went into it. The fact that I know developing this is not something that just took place over the last 2 months, but was months and months and months in the making, going back to the fall. And appreciate the school committee, Dr. Lyons and Christine, for all of their work that they've put into it.
Thank you. Counselor Dombrowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Lyons, for this, and members of your department and school committee. A few things on this. As far as you had mentioned about retaining personnel, and to my understanding, we have always had a very high retention rate versus some of the other Middlesex League. Has that changed, or does that continue to be the case?
No, we do have a very high retention rate for our veteran teachers. I think it's among, if not the best, or it was the best a year ago in the Middlesex League. What I'm referring to, Ed, is our kind of volatile positions, our hard to hire positions, right? For certain teaching positions, if you're looking for a physics teacher, if you're looking for an environmental science teacher, if you're looking for a computer science teacher, these positions are very, very difficult to fill. And they're difficult to fill across the state, not just here in Wakefield. And so when I'm talking about retaining personnel, if we're able to hire an exceptionally talented school psychologist, in the market that we're in, you're either recruiting or being recruited. So that's kind of one of two spaces. So that's what I mean by that, Ed.
Okay. And so it doesn't sound like that it's, it sounds like you're more narrowly focused on a competitive pool in specific skill sets for unique positions or positions that are more highly in demand. Is that fair?
Yeah, well, in this labor market, I think all teaching positions are in that space, plus minus. And so, if you're a fourth grade teacher, classroom teacher, and you have 12 or 15 years experience, you can get hired in a moment, right? And so the market is really, really open right now. And so, and like I said, people are either being recruited or you're recruiting. So that's where we are.
And with the, because I was looking, I hear what Councilor Chines is saying. I don't know that I would use state funding percentages as an indicator, because there are plenty of years where funding is not where it should be. And so I think you kind of take the good with the bad. So I'm not sure that that necessarily correlates with where we should be in terms of our percentages. But I do look at our enrollment, and this year over next, the enrollment has actually gone down. Right, we're down by, well, it's like about 1.5%, while our Chapter 78 has gone up. Right. So
Yeah.
I look at that, and so I'm like, all right. So we have less students. God bless you. We have less students. We have more state aid coming in. Yet we're talking about a 5.22% projected proposed increase. And I'm already hearing that for FY25, we're maybe shaving a little bit off of this year's number in terms of what's being proposed. And you can see how that can present to like a taxpayer as, well, what's going on here? Because we have less students, more state aid coming in, but yet we're still at a 5.22%.
So
Right.
I can also jump in and speak to that. What it's actually speaking to is net school spending. So what the state is actually telling us is what Wakefield should be growing at in terms of education. And what they use for that is the complicated funding formula. But it's also talking about our subgroups. So it talks about our demographics have changed in Wakefield, which means the subgroups that might be a little bit more expensive to find highly qualified staff and the services that are required for that. So the net school spending should be growing at 5%, not just the Chapter 70 funding part of that, if that helps explain it.
Well, I guess one of the groups that was highlighted was English language learners, and I think Dr. Lyons has said that in his 8 years, he's seen that go up by about 50%, right? Double, I think you said. So we have about 130, EL students currently, right? I'm just thinking of that. So that number as a percentage of the enrollment, which is over 3,300, it just feels like still a relatively small percentage of the overall student population. Is it?
Yeah, but
fair?
It's not. Yeah, but so let me just go back for a moment. If it just for background, Ed, and that slide deck, that snapshot of the slide deck that gave our population was from October 1. Our numbers now are 3,368, which are 50 plus more students that are indicated on that slide, right? And so you were just there. And so so this is based on October 1 data. So our enrollment is up considerably, not down. In terms of looking at educating, and in the second part for background, in terms of educating English language learners, we do a home language survey. And based on that survey, an assessment of where a student stands in regard to their ability and their English understanding and knowledge, they kind of receive a rating. And based on that rating, or based on their level of proficiency with English, that gives them kind of the amount of services that we need to provide real time for them when they move into the district. So there are 5 levels. And if you're a level 1, 2, or a low 3, you need to be taught for 2 periods a day in kind of to support English language learning. And if you're a high 3, 4, or 5, you are required to be taught 1 period a day. So that's above and beyond your other subjects, Ed. So there's some specific tailored curriculum and support that students are entitled to with our with the legislation around supporting ELL students. So they're not like other students. And when you think about support, it's not one for one. I just want to make sure you understand that.
Well, I do, and I support that level of additional support. I'm just looking at it from the perspective of, it feels like you've provided for that in the additional FTE that you've added into this budget. Because is what I'm getting at. Like, I don't see the ELL component of this budget as driving the budget process. And if I'm misinterpreting, let me know. I'm just looking at, comparatively, a smaller, it's a smaller segment of the student population, and you've added the FTE into this new budget. So it sounds like that's been accounted for. So I don't see that being a major budget driver at this point. But am I mistaken in interpreting that?
No, you have it.
And then the other piece is you had mentioned about people talking about this being a $50 million expenditure, about $110, $111 million, I think, total town budget. It's not just 50 million though; it's 50 million plus the benefits that come to the town too. So the total outlay for the town is significantly more than $50 million, all in terms of what school department costs as a percentage of the town budget. And so I think that's an important distinction also to bear in mind. And we've had a lot of discussions when looking at other budgets that have come before us, actually every other budget that's come before us, that's broken down the salaries and the with a level of specificity showing that the percentage changed, but also I could identify every police officer in the police budget. And it feels like this budget, while it's the largest and candidly I think the most significant in town, it feels like this budget is perhaps the most opaque of the budgets, because we don't have that same level of specificity in breakdown. I've gone through the 66 pages on your website. I know you have that. But I don't feel like we have the same level of transparency with this budget. And when we are talking about the revolving accounts, if you look at the budget, if you dig into that, you can see it looks like there are significant revolving balances in several of those revolving accounts. But I don't feel like there's the same degree of openness and transparency with this budget as we find in, candidly, any other budget that has come before us. And I realize we don't vote on this. This is a courtesy presentation. But I don't know why the school department budget is treated so much differently than the format we've had. And to my recall, Mr. Mayo, I think we used to, or the Board of Selectmen, going back, used to have that level of specificity. Is that correct?
Yeah, they, years ago, all salaries were given to the town council, or Board of Selectmen, and the FinCom. That's going back in time.
Because I respect the goals and objectives that you've laid out here, but I feel like that this presentation is light in terms of the numbers themselves. And I think that that's a challenge for taxpayers in light of the tax increases with the high school. And I say all of this as a strong supporter of the Wakefield Public Schools. So this is not meant to be anything but how can we improve upon this so that the residents better understand how the tax dollars are being spent. Because I think when you're already forecasting a very limited, a very modest reduction, I'll say, in FY25, that concerns me, and I think it probably concerns a lot of residents.
So you kind of touched on a number of things there. So why don't we start by just touching on the, personnel, right? You had talked about, us providing information on personnel. We provide that information, Ed. That's public information. I'm happy to provide it to you if you would like it. It's given to FinCom as part of our budget work that we do with them. It's given to our liaison. It's given to the entire group. So I'm not sure if what you need to do to be in the loop there.
Well, if I could ask, is that about not about me? Because I'm sure I could probably call you and you have it over to me. I'm saying it's just the normal taxpayer, like your average taxpayer, when they look at the budgets that come before us for other departments, they see, all right, this is what officer so and so makes. This is what firefighter so and so. This is what, and I just feel like there's not that same level of transparency and so I'm not looking. I know how I can get it. I'm asking more on behalf of the folks who...
Just a point of information, sorry, just on the salary piece. I know we receive that for the budgets that we review. Does that get shared publicly? I don't recall that being in the packets that go publicly just for privacy.
Asked.
Okay.
Not unless that's
Just
FinCom,
wanted to...
FinCom gets
Got it.
everything.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
By person.
So
Yeah.
I would just like to respond to that. So we do work with FinCom. We have our liaisons that come to our subcommittee meetings, and we provide line by line salary information. What we have historically done is in the budget book, we represent by DESI categories because that's how we have to report to the state. So we report by 2305, which is instructional services. We have every category, and in the back of the book, it explains those categories because that's how we have to report and that's how we build our budget. But and the salaries, they have categories and they have amounts for those categories by school. The difference with school finance and ed reform is that schools have autonomy to move money between lines. So say we had to open a new classroom, we had to hire a new paraprofessional. So this is a snapshot in time as of today, but if enrollment spikes and we have to talk to school committee, we can move money between lines per school and per department and program. So that's why it's not so much a one-for-one as maybe other departments in the town, but that's how historically school budgets are presented, is by DESI categories. Now, if we want to drill down in every name of teacher in every school, we can absolutely do that. But sometimes it doesn't translate from year to year because paraprofessionals might become a teacher. So you'll see movement between those types of lines and things of that nature. But in terms of right now, we've absolutely provided all active employees and salaries to FinCom as part of this process.
Right. So it's also, if I can add, Ed, I believe with our liaisons, we've never worked more closely with our FinCom liaisons as we have this year and over the last number of years. So it's my understanding that this is as good as it ever has been. And so your words about opaque are a little curious, but if you're suggesting that there are ways for us to provide more information that you would like to see, happy to do it.
Well, I guess the one, again, my basis of comparison is looking at every other town budget that we've reviewed over this budget journey, and every single town budget has laid out, a level of detail relative to salaries, and more specifically salary increases, so you have a sense of what the percentages are that we don't have on the school side of things. And I think it matters.
I think FinCom has that.
Yeah, what's that?
FinCom has that information.
All right, if they do, we don't.
Liaisons have that. Happy to provide it. I didn't know you wanted it. Happy to provide it.
I think I'd asked her twice. I asked her twice already at 2 of these meetings. But and then the other piece on FinCom is I know that Dan Sherman has been really involved with forecasting, and that's part of the big reason we had the tri-board meeting. He has a whole presentation on forecasting, and I know he had expressed concerns in his capacity through FinCom about the sustainability of the budgeting practices of the school department, and I think his concerns are reasonable, especially since he looks at the totality of where we are as a town financially and where we're headed and where those projections lie. And I guess aside from the fact that you may shave a few $100,000 off of fiscal 25's budget versus 24 is what you're proposing, what are the significant steps or the consequential steps that are being talked about in the school department to address, this budgeting sustainability issue that's been obviously flagged by somebody who does, forecasting, 5, 10, 15 years out?
So in regard to, we're working very closely with our FinCom liaisons. I feel like you heard tonight a snapshot of what we're looking at in 25 and 26. We haven't provided that information in the past. So I feel like that's something new and different that we're working on. In terms of the work that we're doing with our FinCom liaisons and the work that we're doing with Steve, really looking at where we're ending the school year and with funds, if we can return funds, if there's a possibility to return funds to the town to support the work that's happening there and support free cash. We're looking at that. We're looking at a number of different things. So I'm not sure what you're asking about specifically. Dan Sherman made about 50 points in his last presentation at school committee. I'm curious if there's any one that stands out to you.
Well, I think that the most salient point was his concern about the unsustainability of the current budgeting practices. And I think that we have a high percentage increase in comparison to what we're doing across other town departments. And I just want to make sure that we're deploying every dollar to the best possible purpose we can. And I'm not saying we need to be cutting school budgets, but I'm saying that we have to be able to rein in all of our budgeting practices across all of our departments in such a way that we don't have issues in fiscal 25, 26, 28, 30, whatever the case may be, because we're going down this path that has become just simply unsustainable. And I thought that when we had more state funding, not as much as we should, candidly, but more state funding coming in, I thought that would have lessened some of the burden on the taxpayer. And from what I'm hearing from folks, they're getting pretty concerned about the fact that they're going to have a pretty significant increase because of the new high school, which I understand. We need a new facility, not challenging that, but that coupled with this increase, which seems to be out of line with the other town departments and represents the largest budget of the entire town budget, I think it creates some concerns for folks, and I think rightfully so, especially when we're talking about the issues, Dr. Lyons, like you mentioned, like inflationary concerns remain, the cost of goods, not just for the school, but also for individuals. So I'm just trying to reconcile that in a way that also confirms that the school department gets it, because I think some of the messaging by some folks in town is that perhaps the school department isn't necessarily being as restrained in budgeting practices as perhaps some of the others, because we have picked apart Steve's budgets, met every single one of them candidly, and I've sat down with Steve privately and gone through those budgets too with him, talked about it. So I want our kids to get the best education possible, but I want to make sure that we're doing it within our means in a sustainable way, so we don't have peaks and valleys.
So if you look at the budget that we're proposing for FY24 compared to 23, we're level funding 2 of the 3 areas. We're kind of investing in personnel. And I don't know if you're suggesting that we need to cut in personnel. I did hear you say in the meeting before last that teachers deserve a new contract. And so, I don't know if in regard to our other 6 bargaining units, we have 7 bargaining units. I didn't know if you were suggesting that in the other 6 bargaining units, we make cuts, right? That's like our food service people, our paraeducators, our crossing guards, every other contract is settled. And so the only kind of work that we're doing right now in regard to personnel is the teacher contract. But if you have feedback for us or you feel like we need to make cuts, I welcome that feedback. In regard to building a prudent budget, I feel like we've done a pretty great job. And I'm not saying that we're not open to kind of taking feedback. We are, but this budget is we have a $500,000 offset. We're not just shaving off. I think you said we're shaving off a couple $100,000. This isn't just shaving off a couple $100,000, right? And if you look at the costs of what it's going to cost to settle contracts, not only for teachers but across the town, we're all going to be in about the same space, Ed.
I think if you look at the other town budgets, we're at a 2.84% across the other budgets in this town, and we're at 5.22 for the schools. And I think that can't get lost on us in all of this. We have police, we have fire, we have a lot of other folks. And I'm not suggesting it's about making cuts. There are also non-union employees. I don't know how administration is currently structured, or if there's an opportunity to revisit that in terms of FTE, or how. I don't pretend to know all the answers. All I can say is, as a representative, one of 7 of us representing the taxpayers and trying to be a voice for them, it's a concern for folks, and I get it, and I think you get it too, Dr. Lyons. But I was just hoping to hear a little bit more empathy with where the taxpayer is, to understand, and also, and equally, to inspire the love of learning is your mission, as it should be, and I fully support your mission. But we got to figure out, I think, a better way to do this to make it sustainable.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. And I just to explain the process, we don't vote on this budget, but you'll go in front of FinCom. I think on Thursday is when you go in front of FinCom. Is that correct?
I don't
Are they
think
already
that
with?
date has been set yet.
Okay.
There's some scheduling issues.
So there are many more conversations to have before all voters get to vote on this at town meeting. Councilor Dennehy.
Yeah, I just want to say something. As somebody who was on school committee for 6 years, in terms of the budget process, when by the time you get to present to the school committee, I mean to the town council and to FinCom, that budget process has gone through such an extraordinary, like stringent process from the beginning, from engaging stakeholders, meeting multiple meetings with the budget subcommittee, and integrating the finance committee members into it as well. So I do think that it is a thoughtful approach. And I also think that, sometimes we do compare the school budget to the other budgets. And I would just argue that I don't think that you really can compare them, because I think education is more dynamic in terms of every year the needs are changing more in terms of what we're learning and the expectations that are placed in terms of the goals that we need to be meeting. Um, and it's, I know that when I was on school committee, one thing that was really important to us was class size policy, was being able to maintain lower class size policies, because we know that with lower class size policies, that leads to better learning outcomes for our students. It's also, at the same time, is that, we're student needs are broadened. We're looking at more individualized. Another trend in education has been individualized instruction, and being able to collect more data on students so that we can kind of track students, identify needs earlier, so that we can identify if there's any special needs, that those get identified earlier. Again, we know that the learning outcomes are much better for that. So I'm not sure that, education changes year by year in terms of what we're trying to achieve, not just in terms of just making sure that we continue to be kind of cutting edge. And I think that, one thing that with COVID is that we realized is that, we do have these big gaps. And one thing that I was really happy to see in there is that you said opportunities for intervention, acceleration, and supplemental support. And I'm glad that we see the opportunities, for all levels, because I'm sure that, it must be a very difficult thing to be teaching right now, because I know that some students did very well during COVID. Some students didn't do so well in COVID. So those achievement gaps have been widened. So I just think that I think that meeting the needs of our students is something that's constantly changing, and what our students need in the world changes. So I don't know if we can compare it to the other town budgets necessarily. One thing I did want to add, one thing I was happy to see too, is that maintenance on the buildings. I think that's really important, is that we make sure that we maintain our buildings, and that that's a really important thing as well. One thing that I heard you say, Doug, at a meeting a while ago, was something about that you think that we need to be doing, that the schools should be doing a strategic, not a study and looking at like long term, so that maybe that, a projection of what's going to be needed to aid in better planning around budget and just kind of forecasting. Can you speak to that just for a minute?
Sure. I think, every year we start the budget process, and every principal is required to go through every person in their building to kind of talk about the work that they do and the population that they serve. And so, and then they come and they present their budget, and they present based on the student population they have, the needs of those students, as part of the budget process. And so we take all of that feedback, and we kind of present back to all of the administrators what the budgets would look like if we could fund all of their asks. It's a little like capital, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but the process of going through and just looking at, it's like building a zero-based budget every year. And so I don't know that people know that or understand that, right? So we know that personnel is our biggest driver. And we are always looking very closely at FTEs. If we can reconstitute an FTE, if we can change personnel, if we can move personnel from levels, if, for example, a population is shrinking at a level and it's going to the middle school. We've moved teachers from elementary to middle in the last few years to move with students they're serving because populations are changing. And so just trying to be nimble. It's not, I think when I was listening to the meeting earlier, Steve, someone had made a comment that, we're not building budgets and just expending every cent that we have and asking for more. That's not it at all. And so I don't know, Ann, if there's more information than you need. I don't want to get going here on a soapbox, but
No, that's good.
yeah,
Thank you.
of course.
No, that's good. And I just have one question, is that do we charge and do we market like the Savings Bank Theater to outside groups? I remember when that was created, it was so that we could have outside groups and that we could charge fees and there was going to be marketing in that. Is that happening?
It is happening. It is happening. In fact, we just had a meeting with the architects and the design team for the new building with the leaders of the president and of the Savings Bank to talk about the new Performing Arts Center, and the naming is going to come over from the Black Box Theater to the new Performing Arts Center. And so, but the answer to your question is yes. We rent facilities, and that generates revenue and comes back to our facilities, and it helps us maintain the facilities as well, and offsets costs not only for the schools but on the town side as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're certainly welcome.
Counselor McLean?
Dr. Lyons, a couple of questions and a comment. About a year ago, I asked you how we were doing for teacher retention, and without hesitation, you said we're the best in the Middlesex League. Could you tell us whether during this past school year, from a lateral perspective, be it a 5-year teacher, 10, whether we have lost any teachers or how many teachers due to being outbid by other school districts?
I don't have the exact number with me in terms of personnel that have left or gone to other districts at this point. I do know that we're competing most fiercely for new positions or new hires, right? And so, or hard to fill positions. So it's not only us, but every district are competing for the same personnel in regard to, hard to fill positions. And so some positions are different than others.
Right, you might have to pay a premium to get somebody in one of those positions.
Correct. Yes, sir.
But I'm wondering, is there a big outflow of teachers because we're being outbid, existing teachers?
No, I don't think that there's a big outflow as much as, I think people are just looking at, I think the climate right now, it's very, very difficult to work in public schools. And it's very difficult during COVID and post-COVID to be a teacher and an administrator for that matter. And so I don't think that there's been a massive exodus in the Wakefield public schools, which we're lucky. Other districts things have been more tenuous, but I feel like we're like other Middlesex League districts that are struggling to get certain positions, certain teachers, and we're also struggling to keep personnel, right? That have been here for a short period of time that know the market.
Without getting into this is more comment, without getting into the nitty gritty of revolving accounts and all.
Yeah.
I know it's been said that, I think Chair Markham may have indicated that, if you're paying a fee, you don't expect it to go someplace else, you expect it to go for your child. Well, that might be the case in some instances, but what I'm hearing is that there may also be some situations where, whether it's, I'm not to pick on anybody, but in a particular category where money has been growing because certain expenses were being covered in another way. And I think that's a positive development. What I'm hearing there is, if I send my child to a facility, be it at the academy or wherever, I may have in my mind that it's reasonable that I contribute to the janitorial or that I contribute to the heat. So I'm glad you're looking at that. And that's all I'll say about that for now. The only other question I had was, what is POST? I'm not familiar. Is that a Commonwealth program? Is it something we are doing
No.
on our own?
Post is our 18 to 22-year-old program that's located on the back of the Greenwood Fire Station. There's a small space back there, and we have, I want to say, 6 or 7 students, which is the population there right now. We're required to provide functional academic programming and kind of support in regard to work, transition to work for 18 to 22-year-olds that are in that program. So it's actually a terrific program, and it was incepted before I arrived, and so, but I know that it has saved the district quite a bit of money, because for students to go out of district to get those same services, it's very costly.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Of course, you're welcome.
Thank you. Any other counselors? Counselor Vincent?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just had a quick question for you, Dr. Lyons. I was looking at the FY24 proposed budget over the weekend, and I'm a little confused on the enrollment figures, because the
Yeah.
figures up here are so there it showed that you had 3,328 students, 22 to 23, and then projected for 23-24 was 3,381, which was an increase
Right.
of 53 students. Because I was actually going to ask you, how much does that affect your budget with an increase of 53 new students projected for
Yeah.
next year? But then I see different numbers here on the presentation, so I wasn't quite sure what the actual enrollment numbers were.
The numbers can go up and down day by day for students that are in district or in out of district programming. But right now, the numbers are 3,368.
Okay.
So in regard to your question, I think based on the distribution of the increase of students that we have some open seats in classrooms. We've been able to absorb those costs within the current budgets. And also within the teacher to student ratios that we've established in the contract.
Okay, thank you.
You're certainly welcome. Thank you for the question.
Steve?
Very quick, I'm sorry. The difference between the 3,368 now and the 3,314 or 17
Yeah.
from October. Offline, I just want to make sure if any of them were students that migrated from a charter school or a vocational school, that we can make sure that they're not still trying to charge us. So we'll look at that offline, because you know how they are. They keep sending the bill. So I just wanted to check into that. That's my only comment and question. We can do that later.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I will let counselors, if they want to speak again, speak, but I ask that you keep it brief.
Yeah, no, so I had just 2 points that I wanted to make for context, and then I did have a couple of questions that I wanted to kind of save until, after the table setting was. Counselor Danahy mentioned it's sort of hard to compare the town to the school budget, and one other point that I want to make sure that folks understand is that when we talk about 5.22 versus 2.84, one of the big apples to oranges comparison there is that we have not factored in the potential cost of the police and fire contracts in that 2.84, whereas because the schools can do, move money between different accounts, typically I know the school department does actually include at least a forecast. It's not a real number because the contract's still open, but it does include a forecast of potentially where the teacher's contract could land. So I think I want to be careful when we use that comparison, because again, where our number's a little bit artificially low, given that we haven't included increases for police and fire so far in the numbers that we've seen. The second point that I just want to make, and I think it's important just to make sure people understand this, the 5.22% increase is an increase in expenditures. It is not after the increase in state aid. My understanding, and Dr. Lyons, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that that's an increase in total projected expenditures, sort of regardless of the source. So whether it's coming from Chapter 70 or tax levy or wherever else, the number is that number. And so if state aid is increasing by more than the percentage increase on the school side, effectively the impact of the increase on the tax levy is lessened. So that's a point that I just wanted to make sure that we all understood as the council, and certainly the public understood. But getting to the questions I had, just a couple of specific things I wanted to ask about. You talked about, looking at the revolving funds and making sure that we're charging back, the costs of custodial overtime and, building usage and things like that. And I think that's great. I think that's, sort of cost-based budgeting at its best. So I really applaud you guys for taking that approach. I did want to ask, just with regard to some of the grants that we receive, do we follow that same sort of methodology, or is there an opportunity there to make sure that, to the extent that we can, we're also charging back, fringe expenses and overtime and facilities costs and things like that when we do get grant funds into the school department?
So I can speak to that, Jonathan. So grants are a little different, particularly federal and state grants. They're really specific. They're either entitlement grants based on our demographics here in Wakefield, or they're competitive grants that we filled out an application about why we're asking for the money and how we're specifically going to use that money. So there's something in finance they call supplanting. So you're not really able to put anything on a grant that you really would have paid for from your local budget. So we have to be really, really careful that we only put on those grants expenditures that we wrote into the grant. We can't really put utilities, and we're really hesitant also about putting anything that we can't sustainable on year after year for salaries onto grants that weren't written into that, if that answers your question. So it's a little bit more strict.
Yeah, maybe just to kind of ask a more specific question with it. So with the position that we're getting through the Board of Health grant, is that grant covering salary or salary and benefits expenses?
So I wasn't part of that grant, writing that grant, but it was for that salary for 3 years.
Okay.
So I believe that it is funding salary, Jonathan,
Okay.
not kind of the budget or the additional package.
Got it. So,
Right? I think that there's some expenses that will go to the town on that, but very small.
so that may be something, Mr. Mayo, just as we, I know we apply for grants left and right. As we are applying for grants for, if that's something we can keep in mind around the requests that we make. Second question I had, you did mention, kind of the discipline of sort of returning extra funds to, kind of town accounts to supplement free cash at the end of the year if they're unspent. Do we have, I know
Yep.
we still have a bit of the year to go, but do we have a sense as to how you guys are trending relative to your fiscal 2023 budget and any return that you might be anticipating, not holding you guys to anything?
Yeah, I think, Christine would know better than I in terms of how we're trending right now. But I think in our quick debrief today, we anticipated this question, Jonathan. And I think in our quick debrief, I think we had talked about just really needing to close out the budget, and we'll know more likely June 10th, June 15th. We'll have a better indication there. But we're really looking at ways to do that, right? Whereas, I think we're working on some different kind of different concepts there, and so there'll be more information to follow.
Okay.
I know Tom wanted to share something here. Or Tom, did you had your hand up earlier?
I did, but I'll happily, be recognized when appropriate. Thank you, though, Dr. Lyons.
Sure.
Just one last quick question.
Of course.
School lunches. So I believe in the presentation, one of the unknowns was, will the state be funding school lunches? I think since the budget was prepared and maybe even approved by school committee, it looks like the state is funding that. Can you speak to what impact, if any, that has on the budget? I know, that comes out of a revolving fund, but
Yeah.
maybe if you could talk a little bit about the mechanics there or any potential impact to the total budget.
Yeah, go ahead, Christine. I see you on mute.
So we don't know yet, Jonathan, really. We don't have the final word. The new governor has proposed to maintain free meals for next school year, but until the budget process is complete, we really won't know until that is definitely approved. All signs are pointing in that direction, but that will mean a lot to that program because of free meals. For the past 2 years, we've had double enrollment in participation numbers. So we're serving twice as many meals than we did before free lunches. So we've had to increase our staffing. We've had to increase products. We've had to increase paper products. So it has really impacted that program. So we're not really sure at this point if it's going to remain free, but if it does, we're going to have to really look at our staffing levels for that program. Now, if it's not free, we will have to adjust accordingly. Does that mean our participation rates will decrease? Will you not have to order as much food? So we're hearing that we'll probably know in early July if the ruling for that, but at this time we still don't know. Fortunately, we have about 3 months of reserves currently in that revolving account. So we are required by state, the statute, to maintain that in that account. Just for that reason alone, if there's adjustments in the funding of that program to make sure we can sustain the salaries for 3 months for the start of the next school year. So we're anxious about what that's going to mean for the program. We have a new director, Dustin O'Brien, who's fantastic. He comes with 14 years of experience in food service. And we have a lot of forecasting and projections that we've done about, well, if it's free, what are we going to do? If it's not free, what we're going to do. But we're anxious for July to hear about that.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Counselor Smith Galvin? Thank you. So that actually just makes me ask my annual question. Are you going to be in compliance with the styrofoam bylaw this year?
So we're hoping to. It's also about supply and demand. I know we've spoken about this, about during COVID, every district was trying to find biodegradable products. So I believe Danielle Collins signed a waiver last year in order to be exempt from that.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll have to see about when we go out to bid for those products.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Markham.
Great, thank you very much. So I'd like to, I guess, start where I'll finish up by saying a big thank you to the town, to our partners at Town Hall, from the town administrator's office through Councilor Chimes and his liaison work, to the finance committee and their liaisons. We are an incredibly well supported school district, and truly are grateful for the partnering. I think we're also very, very grateful while I have the microphone, so to speak. Also very grateful to the town and to the taxpayers for the very strong and overwhelming support for the new high school. We don't have to remake that case, but it can never go stated enough. Meaning a thank you can never be stated enough. That's going to be incredibly meaningful for generations of students and families, in the future. Just a couple of thoughts. We have a variety of very thoughtful and appropriate comments tonight from the town council, and we appreciate that. As the chair of the school committee and representing the school committee and the elected officials on our board, we do not take for granted anything that the town provides and supports. We do not take for granted any comments. We look at them, we pull them apart, we think about them in some pretty thoughtful ways. So the variety of questions, as well as comments, supports, even some criticisms this evening, are certainly they are well taken, they are well heard, and we understand the types of concerns that exist. Specifically to a couple of the notions that the Councilor Dombrowski mentioned, it doesn't go on deaf ears. If you were referring to the school committee counselor or myself, we have worked pretty hard in the last number of years to make our budget more and more transparent and more open. Is there room for improvement? Sure, I'm sure there always is. But any of the types of questions that any citizen, never mind town official, would ever have, please reach out to any of the 7 members of the committee, myself, or the superintendent, the business administrator, and we'll be sure to make sure that those answers are provided. If you're suggesting that we should include an addendum with teachers' names and salaries in the back of the budget book, I'm not quite sure that I would support that, not out of transparency, but out of some privacy. I don't know that that's a practice that is done in the town of Wakefield, but certainly that information is all public information and it's readily available. So if you would like a list of teachers and their salaries, that can be provided to you without hesitation. A couple of the other thoughts that I just like to share. We are not unaware and have been keenly aware over the last couple of years as we've seen COVID dollars and pandemic funding, both that we've received directly from the feds and from the state, as well as additional supports from the town. We've been keenly aware that this information, that there is a cliff. There is a funding cliff that every community in the country, never mind just ours, is about to hit. And we have known that since we accepted the first, pandemic dollars, which is why we have tried very, very hard to expend first one-time money, or even one-time money allowed to be expended over a couple of years. It's still one-time dollars. We've worked incredibly hard to spend that on really non-recurring things. That isn't necessarily the case with some of the positions that have been necessary due to COVID, based on student needs, facility needs, sanitation needs, health, mental health, as well as actual, our public health needs. But I think a couple of the questions that council has asked about, what does our planning, look like? Since we first accepted the first COVID dollars, we were keenly aware that the funding was going to end, and if we are employing individuals in necessary positions, what is the sustainability and what is the necessity of those positions? Some of the things that we don't always talk about is the shuffling of positions. Sometimes even in the FY24 budget, and certainly in 25 and 26, there are likely to be positions that will need to go away, frankly. There will likely be positions that can be transitioned or realigned differently. There may be retirements that we may not need to fill in the exact same way because student needs and classroom needs and building needs shift. So these are the types of things that I know the administration does on a daily basis, the school labor committee, as well as the school finance committee does on a monthly basis. But it's a terrific question. So as we are looking at 24, 25, and 26, we are keenly aware of the types of needs based on the elimination of certain funding and what we're going to need to do to transition some positions into the budget or transition some positions out of employment, to be candid. And that's a very difficult conversation to have. But it's an important one, and it's important, I think, that the council as well as the community understands or hears that we're not immune to that conversation and we're not unaware of its need. In support of what the superintendent had said, we have certainly we work on budgets each year and we build them from the bottom up. There is no such thing as just taking the number and just adding 2, 3, 4%, 5% to it. That's not how it works. And it hasn't for a number of years now, but I think it's an important question to be asked. And I thank the councilors that asked it because it gives us a chance to honestly and openly and transparently answer that question. We do build the budget each year from the bottom up with an eye on teaching and learning. What is in the best interest of students? What is in the best interest of those educators that we put in front of the students. We talked a lot about, the teacher's contract, and of course, it's appropriate that we do. That is one of the unknowns. But I think our relationship with our negotiating relationship with the teachers and the teachers union is strong and is crisp. We certainly, as most organizations in our place do, you don't always start at the same place, but you always hopefully land on a good, common square that provides employees with an appropriate, fair, and competitive wage, while at the same time understanding the needs and limitations of the town and the taxpayers. So that is not lost on us at all. But I think it is critically important, as we've talked a couple of times, or I've listened a couple of times this evening, both from counselors as well as Dr. Lyons, our capacity to recruit and, more importantly, retain top quality educators is second to none. The type of individuals that we put in front of our kids every day can't be understated and can't be underscored enough. We want to be able to make sure that we retain the top quality educators. I think a great question was around what is our retention level, and we have had historically a pretty strong retention level. One of the things that I think contributes to that is the level of investment over the last probably 2, meaning 6+ years of teacher and other educator contracts. The town has been generous in support of the types of needs educators have and the types of respect in the workplace and dignity in the workplace that they deserve. We have made some substantive investments in the salary schedules and the salaries over the last 2 contracts, and we hope and want to be able to do the same again, yet still with an eye on the limitations and the crisp understanding that the resources are not a bottomless pit. We are well aware of that. We're trying to balance that, because as I mentioned a moment ago, being able to put top quality educators in front of our kids is not anything more important than we can do and we can advocate for than exactly that. I think the educators in Wakefield, regardless of what classification, whether you're a teacher or paraeducator or a custodian, every adult in every building can have an impact on a kid, on a child. Making a smile for a day can really be quite impactful.
Thank you, Chair Markham. Can we wrap? You ready to wrap it up? Sorry.
Yeah. No. I appreciate that, and I didn't mean to.
No, you said.
Yeah.
Anything else you wanted to add?
The last thing that I wanted to add was again just I wanted to finish where I started, that this work doesn't end, and this work and the partnership with the town is very much appreciated, and we will continue to take heed input and feedback that we receive from every aspect of the town to make the school budget and the work that we do better. So thank you for your hopeful support.
Thank you. And thank you, Doug and Christine and Tom, for coming today. I think what you heard from all of us, I'm just going to the town overwhelmingly supports the schools. We approved a new high school. Every single member of this town and at this town council wants the schools and the staff and the students to be successful. And we want to be collaborative in that. So when Steve offers to let him know about money we can get back if students have come back, please work with that. Julie asked a great question about procurement. A couple of meetings ago, we had a conversation of, do we partner with other surrounding towns for procurement about DPW commitment? If we're having a hard time getting biodegradable, compostable stuff, like reach out to Julie. She is world renowned on this. But also, like, let's think about this. Like, we want to partner with you. So, you know, we know it's a thoughtful, deliberate budget. There's always room for improvement. And we want to all of us here want to work with you on that. So hopefully this is, you know, continue ongoing conversations. But thank you for coming and presenting today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
very much.
Thank
you.
you.
Have a good night.
Good evening.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Sorry, Julie, I didn't mean you, but I meant maybe we partner with Stoneham and Melrose and Linfield to
Makes
buy
sense.
all the biodegradable
And
They're
Julie.
gonna get free lunches.
and what?
And Julie.
And Julie. Julie's
Julie's
gonna go
be
to
driving around with
Costco.
her electric car buying
Yeah.
biodegradable trays.
She's gonna have a markup, 25% markup.
That would be great.
The kids are pushing it though. Like they're pushing it more than the adults are.
I
was gonna say,
think
one of my sons has actually met with the principal at the Galvin and said, why don't we have biodegradable things? And I did not put him up to this. So
Good for
either
you.
Julie, you're more influential than you know,
No,
or
I
it's
don't
something
know.
that kids are interested
And
in.
ESC will be here next month or next meeting, and they'll talk about some of their efforts in the schools.
that sounds great. Thank you. Okay, item 15, announcements. Counselor Smith Galvin.
I do have some. Let me just find them. Wait, I have to find them. First, I want to thank Representative Lippert Garabedian and the DPW and the Environmental Sustainability Committee for a successful event on Saturday on the second annual recycling day. So I don't have the numbers of what we collected, but it looked like it was a pretty steady flow and some great conversations happening with the light department was there talking about their energy savings programs and Black Earth and a couple of other, I think the youth council was there. So thanks to everybody for that. Ballots are now available for the election that we voted on earlier tonight, so that April 25th election. As a reminder, people can vote now at Town Hall during regular business hours. And I know school vacation is coming up, so it's a good thing to just get off your list before you leave on vacation, or if you just have a busy life. Voting early is now, no questions, just go right ahead and go in and vote. The other thing I wanted to mention was senior night is coming up in May, and that's a really important event for our seniors to keep them safe on the evening of their prom. It's great that it's back in full force after COVID, but they're doing fundraising. And in addition to money, people can donate goods and gift cards, and they just try to have something for everybody. So that's a great event that was started by our Wake Up Coalition and really does help keep our kids safe. I think that's all I have.
Thank
I-
you.
somebody else will say the last
Counselor Dombrowski.
I'll just add on to Councilor Smith Galvin's announcement about senior night. It is incredibly important. I took part in it last year, and my only advice as now a veteran of doing this is you're best to sign up early because it is
The
an
3 a.m.
all-night
shift.
event. And I don't think I've seen the sunrise walking out of the building since college. But I started, I think, around 9, and I went until about 5 a.m. But it was awesome. It was a great time. There's so many you can deal poker, or blackjack, and so many great ways to be involved though. And the best part about it is the students. There are so many students that take part in it, but they need volunteers. They need adults who can be there because otherwise they can't make it happen. So please, those signups I think are actually coming up quite soon.
WakefieldSeniorNight.com.
Yeah. So please, piggybacking on that, please sign up for it. It's a lot of fun. And try
Sign
to get
up
those early.
now.
Yes.
Now,
Immediately.
right now.
Yes.
Thank you. Counselor Tynes.
Sure. Just a couple of events to highlight. One this Wednesday is the Wakefield Educational Foundation Celebration of Learning. I mean, we've talked a lot obviously about the schools for the last hour or so. But that is a great event for anyone who hasn't been there before. It's really a great event that recognizes teachers, community volunteers, and students for leaderships and contributions to the schools. It's inspiring to go to, and really, if you ever down on your sort of faith in humanity, it's a great event to go to and really just be excited about, what's happening in the world and in our community. So encourage people to go to that, and really just wanted to extend kind of our hearty congratulations to all the students, the amazing teachers and administrators, and also, again, the volunteers who are being honored there. what's equally exciting is that there are probably dozens and dozens more volunteers who could be recognized for the work they do in the Wakefield Public Schools. But just a great event. Another great event, so with school vacation week, the carnival to benefit the Wakefield Independence Day Committee is coming back. That'll be at the Galvin next Wednesday through Saturday, 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. So for anyone who's not traveling for school vacation week, great opportunity, and the weather is getting warmer, so hopefully we'll have a couple of nice evenings to enjoy that. And then finally, just wanted to mention, I think we mentioned last time, I can't remember if we did, but Blossoms at the BB is coming up at the end of the month. It is the 100th anniversary of the BB Library, and so should be a great event, and I know I bought my tickets and I'm eagerly excited to go.
Thank you, Councillor Chines. I have some announcements just to build on that. So this Saturday from 9 to 11, the library will be celebrating their 100th anniversary. They're having an open house, so please try to go this Saturday if you can. I'm going to talk about my favorite topic, and we did the recreation budget earlier, but the lottery for the community gardens happened. I won again. And so be prepared. It's
Just
a
a
lottery.
coincidence.
Just a coincidence. Yes.
What are the odds?
I don't know how many people did the lottery this year, but really excited. Still one of my favorite things in our town that we have. For those celebrating like me, Ramadan comes to an end next week. So Eid, our holiday, is on April 22nd. So just we're almost halfway done with fasting. And then I just wanted to say thank you and best wishes to our former state rep, current mayor of Melrose. He announced today that he will not be running for re-election. Paul has always been a great friend of Wakefield, and we wish him all the best. Steve, Tom, or Sherry, any announcements?
Nothing, thanks. Very quick, there is a salute to service vets for veterans lacrosse game, the Wakefield lacrosse team on 4/26, April 26th, a very important day, I might add, at 6 p.m. at Landrigan Field. There'll be more information of that as we go later, but it's a really great to see our sports teams and the kids getting involved with the veterans, and there'll be information coming out on this. There'll be dropping off of items that they hope to package up and send to our soldiers that are overseas. So there'll be more coming out on that with our communications department, but put it on your calendar. That's it.
Thank you. Sherry, anything to add?
No, I'm all set, thanks.
Great. Item number 16, matters not anticipated for agenda. No. And then do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
Great. All in favor? Aye. Great. Unanimous. Thank you. Our next council meeting will be Monday, April 24th at 7 p.m. Thank you all.